Rally I've seen probably ever with you and AOC the other day in the Bronx. I saw a contingent of Jewish individuals carrying signs says "Jews for Jamal." I'm sure that had to have been a very welcoming sight to you, Congressman.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been very hard, since I got into office, to be labeled with this misrepresentation of who I am as an, anti-Semite. That is not how my mother raised me to be. This she raised me to love all people and to be respectful of all people and kind to all people, which I try my best to be. And what I continue to remind people is when you criticize a state or that state's leadership, it doesn't mean you are criticizing a people. You are against a people. When I criticize Saudi Arabia, I'm not doing it because it's a Muslim nation. I'm doing it because I disagree with the nation's policies. Same thing with China. Same thing with this country. And so,
Yeah.
it's always important to clarify that criticizing the state of Israel or Benjamin Netanyahu is not criticism toward the people. And yes, there are Jewish organizations like Jewish Voices for Peace, Bend the Arc, Americans for Peace Now, If Not Now, Jews for Racial and Economic Justice that support me wholeheartedly. And I'm so appreciative and humbled by them.
Why does mainstream media neglect the issue of pay to play politics, and how does this oversight harm Black and Brown communities?
Because everyone's making money, right? If the mainstream media was to begin to criticize pay to play politics, they won't have an organization like APAC spending $20 million to run ads on their airwaves. It's the scourge and the plague of rabid plantation capitalism, where the wealthy oligarchs have all the money and all the power, and working class people, particularly working class people of color, get it the most and remain at the bottom. It hurts Black and Brown people because historically we have always fought to be a part of democracy, and not just fought, we have fought and died to be a part of this democracy. But now, if you're going to base our democracy on how much money someone has, while at the same time keeping us away from reparations or building our own wealth, how can we compete? How can we even be a part of the conversation? And that's why for us, it's always been about grassroots organizing, making sure we are knocking on every single door in the Bronx, Mount Vernon, Yonkers, New Rochelle, Greenburgh, Portchester, the entire district, knocking on doors, making phone calls, doing everything we got to do to connect personally with the voters so that they don't believe the propaganda that's out there being pushed by racist billionaires. Because he was recruited by APAC to run against me because I called for a permanent ceasefire very early on.
The issue of Palestine and Israel is on the ballot here.
Longtime Westchester County Executive George Latimer saw it as one of several reasons to mount a challenge.
The fire alarm incident was inexplicable.
Bowman pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor for pulling a fire alarm in Congress during a controversial vote last year.
His response to October 7th was yet the next, type of thing.
He is attacking me as if somehow my position is outside of the mainstream. It's his position with some of the squad members that's outside the mainstream.
Record-breaking sums spent here on ads. Pro-Israel groups backed by AIPAC make up more than 14 million of it.
Jamaal Bowman has his own agenda, and he's hurting you.
Welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known, the award-winning Let It Be Known. I will tell you, Jamaal Bowman's opponent, George Latimer, is a stark, raven racist. I said it. I covered him years ago when I worked for the Journal News, the Gannett paper in Westchester County, New York. And this guy does not want Black people. He's in our conversation with Representative Bowman yesterday, this was brought up. He does not, did not, and does not want black folks, Latino folks, even Asians in Westchester County. This guy has done, they had a consent decree. And when you have a decree from the federal government, you have to follow that in order to retain or resume your sovereignty. And he still went against the consent decree when it comes to fair housing, affordable housing, and things of that nature. Um, you may not like Jamal. I'm not telling you. I will never tell anyone who to vote for. Voting is not my thing. That's your thing. You want to uh, push for one over the other. I will tell you that George Latimer, his opponent, does not like you, doesn't want to be around you. And now he has all of this APAC money behind him. Today, we will find out if they have succeeded in booting Jamal out of office. And they mentioned that whole fire alarm thing. Look, it is a 10 alarm if there's a such thing, fire in this country. And Jamal did that, pulled that fire alarm. Now, he says it was an accident. Um, but even if it wasn't, at that moment, they were having a crucial vote in Congress. And at that moment, it was imperative that something was to be done. And Jamal decided to do that to stop the madness because it was going to hurt you, not because it was some sort of self-aggrandizing moment for Representative Bowman. So you gotta be informed. Many of you will be going to the polls and casting your votes, particularly in that race up in Upper New York, the Bronx, I should say, and Westchester County, and in other places they'll be voting. But you got to be informed. You should be informed as we try to inform you constantly and correctly. You see that gentleman there who has a really nice bald head almost and a great glasses. That is the one and only Takuma Roebuck. Thanks so much for joining. Let it be known this morning.
Oh, thank you for having me. I truly appreciate it. It's always an honor to see you, to talk with you, Stacy.
Well, you are the man out there in Texas, and we appreciate you so much. But we're going to cover some things today. It's been 15 years since the death of the King of Pop. We will discuss his tragic death, his lasting legacy. Why is he still so influential, not only with today's artists, but I said Texas, and he is in Chicago. He didn't even correct me. He's like, let him go with it. Let him go with Texas. Um, but why Michael Jackson is still influential with not only artists today, but a new generation of fans. Also, our conversation you saw with Congressman Jamaal Bowman. Um, Also, we are waiting to see if the Supreme Court, this is it, a couple of days left, will they rule on the immunity case of the twice impeached, 34 times convicted former President Donald Trump? What's taking them so long? And a white couple from West Virginia is back behind bars after a judge revoked the initial bond and raised it to $500,000 apiece, more than double the amount they faced last year when police arrested the pair on charges of locking their adopted black children in a barn and forcing them to work as slaves. They adopted these black kids to make them slaves. How about that? We're going to talk about that this morning. And briefly, before we go into all of that, today is June 25th, and it marks really, Takuma, three remembrances, three anniversaries, if you will. Of course, we'll talk about Michael Jackson a little bit later, the most significant in pop culture. But on this date in 2009, Michael wasn't the only news. Farrah Fawcett died at the age of 62 after being diagnosed 3 years earlier with cancer. Farrah Fawcett, of course, her death came just a couple of hours before Michael's death. And we all thought, Takuma, and just a quick thought on this, we all, if you're in the news business, when Farrah Fawcett died on June 25th, 2009, we thought that was the huge story of the day, perhaps the story of the year. Farrah Fawcett, of course, was such an icon. But I mean, tell me what your thoughts were before we segue. But your thoughts were that morning when you heard the news of Farrah Fawcett dying.
Well, I mean, again, a significant presence of your childhood. If you followed Farrah Fawcett, what's it? And I'm not good with describing certain hairstyles, but there are just certain images from those
What I'm
times
talking
that
about.
remain indelible. And one of them is a smiling Farrah Fawcett. And I cannot describe her hairstyle, but
Right.
you know what it is when you see it. And again, it's one of those linkages to our childhood that when it goes, it's significant. You recognize it and you feel it immediately. But again, as you said, little did we know that we get, um, even more stunning news that same day.
Yeah, absolutely. And within a couple of hours, I just remember being in the newsroom, and I just remember everyone, going, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It was all this tribute to Farrah Fawcett. It kind of reminded me of 9/11 in this sense.
There it
Um,
is.
yeah, that's it. But in this sense, that morning of 9/11, I
Oh
was covering
wow.
a different story about a hijacking of all things. And early that morning, perhaps like 2 hours before the attacks on the World Trade Center. And this guy, just long story short, a janitor was arrested at a school in Mount Vernon, New York, for um, hijacking a plane 20 years earlier. They had caught FBI had caught up with him and thought, wow, this is going to be not only the front page above the
Yeah.
fold type story, but this is going to be the story of the month, story of the year, perhaps. Well, little did we know, a couple of hours later, the story of the century happened when the planes crashed. So with Farah, we thought, wow, this icon has died, and we were scrambling in the newsroom until, like I said, within 2 hours, Michael Jackson had been rushed to a UCLA medical center where he would die from overdosing on a hospital sedative called propofol. But we'll talk about Michael later. But one other anniversary, and I'm going to start it like this, Takuma. Dearly beloved. And with those two words, a new era of pop funk was ushered in. Prince might as well be saying, we are gathered here today to shift the cultural landscape because Purple Rain, the album,
Yeah.
was released on this date in 1984. And a month later, the film came out, and the rest is really history, Takuma. That Purple Rain album was just named in what was it, number 4 on the list of greatest albums of all time by Apple Music.
Apple Music. Yeah.
Um, Unbelievable that everything so much happened on this date, including my man Prince's Purple Rain being released.
Yeah. I think the litmus test for pop stardom is when, even if you're a casual listener of somebody, you have a song from them that you like, that you admire. Prince falls in that category. Michael Jackson falls in that category. Billy Joel. It's just certain artists that they just infiltrate your daily lives. And Prince is one of the most influential. And there was always that debate in the 80s too. There was the Michael Jackson
Yep.
versus Prince argument that used to take place on playgrounds when I was a kid as well.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it took place in so many places. And a funny story about that Prince Michael Jackson rivalry, if you will. And make no mistake, there was a rivalry.
There was
Make
a
no
rivalry.
mistake there,
Yeah.
and it really hit its zenith, if you will, when Michael Jackson did the Bad album, and as he was recording the Bad album, Quincy Jones called Prince up and asked him to be a part of the Bad album. You may know the story. I think Spike Lee was the first to talk about this, but as he was creating the Bad album, Quincy thought it would be a great idea because of this talk of the Prince Michael rivalry and these two huge black superstars. You don't get bigger than Prince, and you certainly don't get bigger than Michael Jackson. And Quincy thought it was a great idea And then he called in Prince. Prince decided, okay, let's check it out. So they get to the studio, and the words "Your butt is mine" is presented. Prince's response was that, well, wait a minute, who's singing that to whom, and who's the foil here? Prince learned that the part that Wesley Snipes played in the video, well, that was supposed to be him. And Prince told them to take a long, long walk on a very short plank. And the rest is history. They never recorded together. Um, but I will say this, when Michael Jackson died in 2009, Prince was on tour. And during his concert, he stopped to pay homage to Michael, including performing Michael Jackson's seminal song, "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough." So, that love, that hate, I should say, that people reported, it was not necessarily hate. It was just, hey, this is what we do. You would never have seen a Drake Kendrick Lamar situation with them.
Right. And I was just thinking as you were talking about them potentially appearing on the track, that would probably today's equivalent would be probably Drake and Kendrick Lamar doing a song together. But the vitriol wouldn't be where it was
Uh,
today, of course, between those two as
well,
well.
of course, back then we didn't have social media too. So, and I could just imagine Prince on social media, and Michael too, for that matter. Because one of the things about Michael Jackson, again, I don't want to go into Michael too much right now because we're gonna have a nice segment on Michael a little bit later. But one of the things about Michael was, what they say. What is it? The word that they Oh, savage. Michael could be savage. So I would have loved to seen him on social media. But Prince's Purple Rain, Let's Go Crazy, of course, and When Doves Cry were both hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts. Wow. Um, I Would Die for You was #8. And of course, the single Purple Rain hit #2 on the track. And that album followed up two other legendary Prince albums, Controversy in 1999. In 1999 proved to be so prophetic in a lot of ways. Um, if nothing else, it was the most clever thing. 1999 Tacoma was released in the year 1982.
Mhm.
Well, when the year 1999 came around, the sales of 1999 skyrocketed. There was some marketing genius apparently for 17 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too with you know, with Prince as well, we're hearing all these like stories post his death that just continue to illuminate his genius uh in the studio and also on the court as well, thanks to Dave Chappelle recreating what a basketball game was like against Prince because he was that dude
He
on the
was that
court
dude.
as well.
Yeah, and it's funny to see that because we don't think about these entertainers outside of what they do, outside of, like, if you're a singer, you're a singer. If you are an actor, you're an actor. But hey, these guys went to school, they
Mhm.
played ball, and Prince certainly played ball. So that,
Yeah.
and as you mentioned, with Chappelle bringing that up and Charlie Murphy, I mean, it's some of the greatest comedic television you'll ever see, was the Chappelle Show, and certainly when it was almost like Eddie Murphy on Saturday Night Live with his recreation of James Brown and the hot tub and all that. I mean, these guys are geniuses.
Yeah, they are.
No doubt. Takuma, going into Angela Conley, I have to lift this up. She loves Prince's "Call My Name." There's so many Prince songs that you could choose, but she loves that one, and I hear you. I hear you. And by the way, Michelle Madison says that she believes that the hairstyle that Farrah Fawcett wore was a shag.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Because I was trying to come up. I know it's a signature 80s hairstyle.
At any moment, Takuma, the Supreme Court will confront a perfect storm, mostly of its own making. A trio of decisions stemming directly from the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Within days of each other, if not hours, the justices are expected to rule on whether Donald Trump has immunity from criminal charges over his efforts to overturn the 2020 election, and whether Trump supporters who stormed the Capitol can be prosecuted for obstructing an official proceeding. The court also will decide whether former Trump advisor Steve Bannon can stay out of prison while he appeals his contempt of Congress conviction for defying a subpoena from the House committee that investigated the Capitol attack. Now, in Bannon's case, he's to start his sentence at the end of this month, or the beginning of next month. And yet the Supreme Court has decided to take that up and will make a decision apparently this week on whether he will have to go to prison or not. But they got these huge decisions coming up, Takuma. First of all, will they make the immunity decision? Will they punt it back to the lower courts, which will then have the effect of really just totally wiping out any chance Trump gets tried anytime soon?
I think they will punt it back. I think he's going to be allowed to run. That's what I ultimately feel. With especially with the outcome of what happened in New York, there was already thrown out there in the news reports that he likely would not get any time for those 34 convictions. So I don't see them precluding him from running for office.
This immunity thing, though, is a real big issue, Takuma, because what you will, in effect, be saying is what Trump had said all along that, and this was actually while he was running for president. Um, Trump had said that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. Trump has said he could grab women by their private parts with no problem. As president, if they rule that a president has total immunity, that means that they are free to commit all types of crimes. But more importantly, as I laid those out about his shooting someone on Fifth Avenue and grabbing women by their private parts, more importantly, this is an individual, and he's not the only one, certainly that thinks this way and feels this way. This is an individual that has promised retribution, including executions of his rivals. So if
Mhm.
you give him that type of immunity, what type of United States of America will this be with him running the country?
I would pray for New York. Certainly, I would pray for Atlanta, Georgia, wherever DAs, had brought cases against him. Um, the political retribution will be fierce. His followers would also willingly, I believe, carry out those same tactics as well. It would be a very draconian environment, I would say, for sure.
Without question. And something else happened yesterday with the Supreme Court. They did release another student loan decision yesterday. Now, we know that they struck down the president's initial student loan plan. Then the president came up with the SAVE plan, which really was another form of relief for borrowers. The Supreme Court also yesterday struck that down. And this is a Supreme Court that has what, three Trump uh,
Yeah.
judges on there. What is it that makes okay, so because you're bigoted, does that also make you totally heartless in other areas? I guess so. I gotta answer my own question there, right? Because what's the harm in allowing those burdened with student debt to have that erased so that they can really feed the American economy?
Yeah.
I mean,
And
explain that to me, Takuma.
yeah. So again, the theme that I think the theme that came to characterize the Trump presidential administration is the cruelty is the point. And the target of that cruelty is the point. When you think about, well, who has student loans the most? It's going to be working class people, people of color, especially. And so, what other way we can remove any possibility of them having more economic empowerment than removing the ability to remedy their student loan situations, right? This is specific, this is targeted, this is intentional, based on the fact of, well, who suffers disproportionately from student loan debt? It's us.
Right. Right. Without
And
question.
that's what it's really
And
all about.
yeah, and all of these policies, all of these, I mean, the affirmative action, the DE and I,
Mhm.
and again, when I talk about affirmative action, when I talk about DE and I, um, what folks have to understand is black and brown people have not been looking, have never looked for a handout as a whole. They've never looked as for a handout. These are not handouts. The affirmative action was not a handout. DE&I is not a handout. What it is a tepid, tepid recognition of the barriers that have been put up and that remain in place to keep most people of color down, most people of color relying on a system that hates them. That's what it's about.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's what people have to understand. This is, we saw that woman running for office in Missouri from Columbia, young, 25 years old, with her hateful views on black folks, telling black folks they need to leave the country if they don't like the country, um, among other things. Um, this is somebody who has embraced the MAGA extremes. This is somebody who has no clue, right? The nerve has no clue of the plight of the African American, no clue of the plight of the Mexican American,
Mhm.
or the Hispanic American.
Yeah.
Um, David Youngblood says affirmative action is a remedy to 400 years of exclusive set asides. Because always remember this, folks, and we said this yesterday, when Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation Act, and as we know, Texas didn't get it for a whole year. A year later, they didn't realize they were free. That's why we have Juneteenth. That is the origin of Juneteenth. Um, the reparations were paid to the slave owners, not the slaves. So we've always been oppressed. And that's the bottom line. And speaking of oppression, check this out, Takuma. Certainly, as disturbing as it is, a white couple from West Virginia is back behind bars. What they did was adopt or took in black children simply to make them slaves. Simply to make them slaves. Donald Ray Lance, who's 63 years old, and Jean K. Whitefeather, who is 62, were ordered to reappear in county court more than 8 months after each posted a $200,000 bond following their arrest. And at the time, police conducting a wellness check at the home were shocked, they said, to discover two of the couple's five adopted children living in deplorable conditions, padlocked inside a ramshackled storage um, on the back of the property, which had no working lights or running water. The abused children were 14-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl. A third child, identified as a 9-year-old girl, was confined to a loft inside the main house, away from the presence of the adults and isolated from her other siblings. So they made the bond now $500,000. There should be no bond. I mean, they simply look. They made that shed. What does that shed look like to you? It looks like 1800s slave quarters.
Yes. Yes. And I think we also, again, shine the light on the agency that allowed this to happen as well. To really look at, well, how are they screening these people that they're able to have three children adopted? That's a problem with the system right then and there. and they should also be put on under the bright lights. They should be scrutinized for this. There should be there's a price that needs to be paid for this. This is ridiculous. But again, this shows just how real racism remains.
Mhm.
People like to think of the good old days. That era is gone. But as this situation highlights, as what Reggie Jackson outlined last
Beautifully
week about
outlined.
his experiences, this kind of demoralizing, macabre, and wretched racism is still around us in 2024, and it continues to be a part of American life.
Yeah, Power 96 says, I will bet a year's worth of my retirement that Donald and Gene are Trump voters. But he makes this point, and this no truer point could be made. Child Protective Services only checks on Black parents. We have seen that even in Hollywood on the big screen. Remember the movie, the legendary, the iconic movie Claudine, in
Yes,
which, yeah, what's her, Diane
Diane
Carroll,
Carroll.
yes, and James Earl Jones.
Hmm.
And we saw the harassment. She couldn't even get a fan from this garbage man without welfare, CPS. Wait a minute, you got to let us know about this. You got, but
Hmm.
you're right, Power 96. That has been the thing that once again they have focused on whatever they can to make life as miserable as possible for people of color. Daniela Pierre says that couple needs to be confined to a lock shed in despicable conditions. Yeah. Um, it's so upsetting that this stuff, and here we are in 2024. We hear a lot. We had our NMPA's convention last week, of course, in Baltimore, and we heard a lot about the slaves that came to the Baltimore area, and of course Annapolis. Annapolis happens to be where perhaps one of the more well-known slave families ever, because of the book and movie Kunta Kinte landed. Um, but um, but we talk a lot about the civil rights movement. It's as if that never happened. When sometimes when you look at America today, it's as if the civil rights movement and Dr. King didn't exist.
Yeah,
It's just it's perplexing, Takuma.
yeah, yeah. And I think now these all, and I hate to bring up this term from several years ago, but these alternative facts and lies are allowed to circulate to foster belief that um, Black people receiving reparations, Black people benefiting from affirmative action is unfair without regard to the history. So these kinds of notions are allowed to thrive. And again, what we have is an environment where people can deny everything and not take accountability. Um, History books can be removed from schools so that people won't have to feel bad about what took place, the very real history that took place in this country.
And
That's scary. That's the
mhm.
the continuation of what we were talking about what a Donald Trump America would look like in 2024, 25, and beyond. You know, this is what we're
Mhm.
dealing with.
Yeah, and you see, Takuma, what Greer was showing us, that there have been complaints. We talked about, as Power 96 talked about, they only check on Black parents. There have been complaints, and for days, about what apparently some neighbors had seen, having them locked in that shed, and they finally acted. Um, Denise Rolock Barnes, the publisher of the Washington Informer, reminds us in a comment there that Claudine, the film, is 50 years old this year. There's a lot of anniversaries this year, and so we talk about
Wow.
this, as Daniela Pierre mentions, the 60th anniversary of the 1964 Civil Rights Act is vastly approaching. I believe that's next month, and so you see all of it. It's almost as if it never happening. And that's what they want you to believe. That's why we have the banning of the books. That's why we can't have certain courses in school. They'd rather put the 10 Commandments in school, but not a black book in school. It's as simple as that.
Hmm.
It's just untenable at times. And imagine, as we said earlier, how things will look if the 34 times convicted former president gets back in the office and there's Project 2025. And
Yes,
again, Power 96, Takuma, he says, where are the black conservatives and the pro-life people? Go along to get along.
that's it.
Gosh. I know the Defender does a lot of this stuff. I know the Defender keeps folks informed out there in Chicago.
Yeah, we do. We try to do our part. Especially with how situation here in Chicago echoes the rest of the country. And one of the big things we dealt with was affordable housing, and how again that remains elusive for many of us. Right, when you talk about rectifying years of you know economic hardship that we've had to endure because of institutionalized racism. Well, home ownership is, again, that's an ongoing theme. It's something we've been talking about for years, as a people. Well, that issue is still prevalent today when you look at the racial wealth gap, right? Again, it's just as bad now as it was, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago. And this is the reality.
Well, 15 years ago today, Takuma, I was working at a newspaper in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And my wife worked on a different floor as well. So we were leaving work together, of course, driving. And I remember exactly where I was, Steamtown Mall. I was at a light at the Steamtown Mall, a red light. And I got a phone call from a guy from Fox News saying, "Hey, Michael Jackson was taken to the hospital." Now, this was just a couple of weeks before his "This Is It" concerts was supposed to begin in London, and he says, "I hear it's very bad." And I said, "Well," my response was, "Well, you got to understand something about Michael. Michael never wanted to do these shows that are coming up. It was 50 shows. It was first to be 9 shows. It turned into 35. Then it turned to 50 shows. He did not want to perform anymore. And I said to the reporter, guy named Roger Friedman, I said, Roger, I would not run anything so quickly if I were you. I said, Michael pulls these stunts because he doesn't want to perform. So this is his way of getting out of his performance. Hung up the phone with Roger Friedman, and then none other than a family member, a brother of Michael, called me and said, "Hey, something's going on with Mike. Do you know?" And I said, "Well, I just got a call that he was rushed to the hospital, and I would imagine that you guys know." So we got off the phone, and then Michael's brother-in-law called me and said, "Hey, um, should I?" They were in Las Vegas. He said, "Should I take my wife to the airport so she can go say goodbye to her brother?" And I'm thinking, "Oh my God, this is really serious." So my wife and I are saying, "Okay, we need to check. We need to find out what's really going on here because now you got the family calling you." And so, sure enough, there's Jermaine Jackson. And I'll never forget when Jermaine made that announcement. Who would ever forget when he made that announcement, that his brother, as he put it in his own words, the legendary King of Pop had died. Um, I will give you 3 quick memories, final memories I had, fond and not so fond memories that I had of Michael. One, I was at a party with him at his ranch in California, and it was so cold. And generally, they have he always has coats and jackets all throughout different stations of the ranch. And I went from station to station. Was in a golf cart looking for. I was absolutely freezing. So I go into. You can't go into his room, but you can go I could go into like his kids' rooms or whatever. And I went and found a robe. It was his robe. And I put his robe on. There's all these people there. Don Cornelius is there. Serena Williams is there. And Michael spots me wearing his robe and he starts, I mean, laughing almost uncontrollably because it came up to about my uh arm here because I'm taller than him, longer arms than him, but I was doing anything to be warm. And I mean, he spent at least 5 minutes just laughing at me, pointing and laughing at me and telling me how crazy I was or whatever. Um, the second memory, I had testified against him in court, and he and I were on an elevator together, which was really interesting. It was him, myself, Mel Sachs, who was my attorney, and Catherine Jackson, his mother. And I just remember him being all over Mel because Mel would wear these three-piece suits, and he just loved this particular three-piece suit that Mel was wearing. He's teasing me like, Stacey, you never dressed like this. This is how you dress. And we're on the elevator. I'm testifying against him. We had a break in the testimony, and yet he's having fun and poking fun at me, which, needless to say, I mean, there was so much fodder to poke fun at him, but I couldn't do it at that moment. Oh man. The last thing I'll share as a memory is when he was acquitted, and it was around this time, in June of 2005, when he was acquitted on 13 charges related to um, allegedly sexually molesting a young cancer patient.
Mm.
A reporter from BBC News asked me, Stacey, this is a great day for Michael, but where do you see Michael in 5 years? It's one of those questions where you go get a job and somebody asks you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And he asked me that question, and the words just came blurting out of my mouth. And for some reason, they decided it made some headlines all over London and out in California. I said, in 5 years, he'll be dead. Well, less than 5 years later, we got the terrible news that Michael Jackson was no longer amongst the living. Tacoma, where were you? And what was your reaction when you heard the death of Michael Jackson?
Well, before I do that, I do want to urge everyone who's listening to please read Stacey's piece in the Washington Informer, Michael Jackson's Legacy 15 years after his death. His influence continues. It was a wonderful retrospective on his life and legacy and the moment that he just described. So I urge everyone to please read that. I was in Chicago in 2009, and I just remember feeling like kind of a hole in my heart. I was in journalism. I was working for a college as a program coordinator, but I just remember it being solemn all over campus. Even then, with the summer school students around and faculty around and staff, there was this just somber, heavy feeling that we lost a part of us, right? I said earlier in the broadcast here that everyone has a Michael Jackson song. Everybody has a Michael Jackson touch point. And no matter who you were when he died, it evoked just this sorrow, as if you knew, as if it was a relative. There was a piece this morning that I read, reread, that the brilliant Greg Tate, rest in peace, wrote in the Village Voice about Michael Jackson's impact. A brilliant piece. And there's a part that I'm just like, it's so true. This also happened when Prince passed away, but he says about Michael, from Compton to Harlem, we've witnessed grown men broke down crying in the hood over Michael. Some of the most hard-bitten 24/7 militant Black friends, male and female alike, copped to bawling their eyes out for days after they got the news. And that's just what the reality was. And it was just the feeling of a whole that we had lost a griot of our generation. The I'll put it this way, and I'll pass it back to you. But in if you want to be a poet, you study Langston Hughes. I think about literature class, and you have to encounter Shakespeare. If you're doing this thing called music in America, pop music in particular, Michael Jackson's sound, style, dance moves, charisma has to be studied, right? Because that's the toll that you have to cross in order to be a pop star in this country. He is the blueprint or one of the blueprints.
Yeah, without question. I was always one, have always been one, who never asked anybody for an autograph, rarely asked for a picture. I just thought that I always felt like it was just not humane to do so for some reason. I mean, I don't not people would get their autographs when I was around Michael, certainly with his family, when I was with Stevie Wonder, who no matter who I was with. I just I always saw people come up for autographs and I always thought I just can't do it. I just can't do that. It's just not me. Um and I did hold on to a letter Michael wrote me um years of course years and years ago. Um and the letter, without going too far into it, was expressing certain concerns that he had about certain things that I had said. And I remember him ending the letter by saying, really think about that if you truly are my friend. Is how ended the letter, and he goes, love you always, and signed it. And, I thought, wow, this guy, he reaches out at this particular time, but again, I don't want to go too far into that because it's only going to drudge up some negativity that doesn't need to be brought up today. But but nonetheless, the point is when you went into a room, if Michael Jackson was in that room, um, immediately you felt something. I had never felt this, and I've mentioned this, that I've only felt this, and I've been around and been close with as far as proximity and as far as in relationship with very, very extremely A-list famous people. And he, of all of the entertainers, was the only individual that made me feel like something different. That this was something different. It was almost like some would describe it as an out of body experience or whatever, but he had this magnetism, if that's a word. He was magnetic. He didn't have to move. He didn't have to say anything. He drew you to him. Um, and that right there, I'm glad she showed that because my very first memory of Michael Jackson and the Jacksons was the Victory Tour, and this was a prelude to the Victory Tour. That what we're seeing now is from the Motown 25 anniversary special, which lit the world on fire and really catapulted this performance here, catapulted Michael Jackson to the
Yes.
status of King of Pop.
Hmm.
And of course, you remember he did the Billie Jean performance there, and got nominated for Emmys for that performance. But I went to the Victory Tour. I was in high schools with uh, a girlfriend at the time, and she was a huge Michael Jackson fan. She had wrote a love letter to Michael, and I'll never forget. Obviously, we so we went. It was at Giant Stadium in the Meadowlands, which is now MetLife Stadium. But
Yeah.
we went over, and then after the show, uh, it was August 2nd, 1984, and after the show, we went to Manhattan. It was maybe 10:30 at night. We start beautiful night. We walk. We didn't know that the Jacksons were staying at the Helmsley Palace Hotel. get to the Helmsley Palace Hotel, just happened to be walking past it, and we
Wow.
see all these people outside of the hotel, Takuma, and we're like, "What's going on here?" And this is the first encounter I had with Al Sharpton, by the way. Now the tickets to the
Okay.
Victory Tour was $29.95, and Al Sharpton had a bullhorn protesting that the ticket prices were too high, that Michael Jackson should be ashamed of himself. And
Wow.
so we thought we'd hang around. So we go around the back of the hotel. We hang out back there. There's only a few people back there, but the big crowd, because of Al Sharpton, I guess, and thinking that they would go to the front entrance, was out front, and we're back there. And sure enough, the first celebrity we saw enter the hotel was none other than Magic Johnson, the basketball player. And we're like, "Oh my gosh, Magic!" And we got the chance to shake his hand and all of that. And then Pia Zadora, you might remember Pia Zadora. She sang with Jermaine, "When the Rain Begins to Fall," and so other celebrities started coming in, and we are like, "Okay, we're in the right spot." And lo and behold, Joseph Jackson, Tito, Jermaine, Marlon, and some others came out, and they had these two burly bodyguards. I mean, these guys, you remember Hulk Hogan, right? They
Yeah.
was like triple the size of Hulk Hogan. So we Amina, oh gosh, I shouldn't have said her name, but she hands Joseph the love letter. And she was really a very brave, outspoken individual. In fact, well, let me not say too much about it, because, but she was very brave and outspoken. And
Yes.
she says to Joseph, "I'm glad that I get a chance to give this letter to you, because I heard that if we gave it to the security, they would probably read it and rip it up and make fun of it." One of those huge, big, burly security guards reached into Joseph's hand, retrieved the letter, gave it back to her, and said, "Well, give it to him yourself." And, and
Wow.
so, and so, a few years later, I'm in Los Angeles, and who do I run into? Jermaine Jackson. And that's where our relationship began, me and the Jacksons. He invited me to the home, and because he remembered, of
Wow.
all
Look at
things,
that.
because I said to him, I said, because he says, "Oh, I know you." I said, "No, you don't know me, but I definitely know you. You're Jermaine Jackson." And he says, "No, I know you." He says, "Give me a minute, I'll place you." And do you know, Takuma? He says, "New York, you were with some girl, gave Joseph a letter."
What?
So I could not believe he remembered that to the T. And he's laughing and laughing. And he goes, "By the way, did Michael ever get that letter?" And so anyway, the rest is
Wow.
history. We became very, very, very close friends. I'd spend time, bring my family. We'd go to Havenhurst and stay there at times, and their home in Encino. And of course, I take one of my daughters, my oldest daughter, and I would go to Neverland. Um, and we'd have so much fun, and I always called Neverland like the second best vacation I'd ever had, when I vacationed there once, next to my honeymoon, of course. But it was just a great, great place, for, of course, I don't want to get into the weeds, but of course, kids love Neverland for obvious reasons. There's candy and ice cream all throughout the ranch. There was the two-story game room, where any game you could think of. The movie theater was always stocked with food that you would see at a movie theater, and candy, and it was help yourself, and you can watch a movie, order a movie, and whatever movie. I saw Michael Jackson's long form video Ghost at Neverland, um, which was really it was years later, 10 years, 12 years later, a follow-up to Thriller. The Ghost video was a
Wow.
follow-up to the Thriller video. Um, but the Jacksons, as Randy Jackson would, he'd walk around and always say that we're the Black Kennedys, we're the Black Kennedys. And it was true. They were our Kennedys. Um, There was no other family, and there probably will never be another family in music like the Jacksons.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just remember like with Thriller being released and my parents taking me to somebody's house to listen to the album. There were people planning social events around his albums to listen to them. It sounds like it's just from another time. Like, I mean, what more do you have to say with that, right?
And look, there were so one of the things that Michael didn't do a lot, but when he did it, it was interesting. It was pretty profound. Was collaborations, duets. Um, the first such duet that I remember, and you think about the Thriller album, was Paul McCartney. The
Mm,
Girl Is Mine, which really didn't move a lot of people, but what did move folks was the line in there, "I'm a lover, not a fighter." Who would forget that, right?
yeah, yeah.
And then there was, one of the more unsung, not that it was such a great song, but the music was absolutely, amazing, was with, Mick Jagger, "State of Shock."
Mm,
That was the music on that song was absolutely I can listen to it forever, because I like rock, and it was a rock song. He did another, duet with Paul McCartney, "Say, Say, Say." Stevie Wonder, he did a duet with, and who can forget, other than, of course, he did a duet with Janet Jackson on "Scream," his sister,
yeah.
but who can forget Eddie Murphy? He and Eddie Murphy did a duet.
They did. That's right. What was that?
They were
I
up
can
in the
see the
clouds.
video.
What was the
I can
name of the
see the
song?
video.
They're in the clouds.
That's right. That's right.
They
Wow.
were actually in the clouds,
Yeah.
and it was for Eddie Murphy's album. I believe it was his debut album. There it
There
is.
it is. Yeah. 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 What's up with you or
OMG.
something like that? I think it was like, what's up with you? Something like
What's up
that.
with that? That's it.
What's
That's
up?
it.
There it is. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it. And what is up with that?
Oh man.
Of course, I Can't Stop Loving You, Saida Garrett.
Lady Garrett.
What a
Yeah.
voice. Saida Garrett actually wrote one of Michael's biggest selling songs and one of his most memorable songs, which is Man in the Mirror.
Hmm.
And of course, he absolutely loved that song. It was, pretty much his anthem, one of his anthems, I should say, was
Oh.
"Man in the Mirror." He loved to perform it. One of the things he once said, I'll never forget, when you think about Billie Jean, for instance, he when folks, because one of the things Prince would do, if you saw Prince in concert, I saw Prince in concert probably 12, 13 times. Prince would always change up. Like if he did Purple Rain at this concert, he'd do it in a whole different way the next concert. Michael's complaint, I'll never forget, he said, I don't have that luxury. He said, my fans, when I do Billie Jean, they want to see it just like I did it at Motown 25.
Mm-hmm.
And he felt trapped. He felt like, and this is why one reason why I was so sad that we didn't get to see the This Is It concerts, because that show was going to be the show which he was going to break out all of his catalog and do things the way he wanted to do it. Even when the Jacksons did their medley of their great songs, like "I Want Your Back," "The Love You Save," they always did it the same way. And in fact, he would introduce it by saying, we're going to do it the old fashioned way, like we did on the Ed Sullivan show. And although he appeared to really enjoy it, the consummate performer that he was, he hated it. He wanted to do it in a different way, but his first love was his fans. And so he wanted to give it to them the way that they demand. He felt that they
Yeah.
demanded. One of the things, Takuma, that you should people should know, when Michael Jackson was 12 years old, and he went to Australia just to talk about the racism in America. He had, he had become a star, of course, a young 12-year-old celebrity. He went to Australia, and I know that there's footage. We found the footage once before. He went to Australia, and in Australia, um, at 12 years old, he was met at the airport by fans and journalists alike. And one Australian journalist had the audacity to say to him, "Wow, Michael, what a reception you're getting here. How does it feel to be an international superstar when you come overseas, but still a nigger in the United States?" At 12 years old. And Michael's response was, "Well, sir, I'm not sure what a nigger is." But at 12 years old, this is America. This is America, and this is so America. The thoughts, the ideals of America. It shows you how it contaminates sometimes the rest of the world. But this is what a 12-year-old had to face.
Had to face, had to answer.
Yeah. And so when you think about Michael, I think that um, one of the things about him that he doesn't get enough credit for. We haven't really gone into his influence today because he has a new generation of fans, and that's the thing that has sustained him. This guy, when he died, the IRS, his estate estimated his worth to the IRS at $2,500. 25, you heard me right, $2,500, right? His estate has made several billion
Yep.
dollars since his death.
Hmm.
Um, and in large part, you got the MJ the musical, you got the movie coming out with his nephew next year. You have all these other things, the Sir Du Soleil show, and all of that. Um, and he's been introduced like no other icon. When Elvis, years after Elvis died, you have people, and they still go to Graceland and they still celebrate Elvis, but it's just Elvis's fans, the ones that remember Elvis and maybe some of their kids. Michael Jackson has been, and this is why he will forever be um, an influencer because he keeps getting introduced to
Hmm.
new, younger fans. And they grow up and they introduce their kids and their kids. It goes on and on. The guy's music is timeless. He basically invented the music video. I mean, you might as well say he did.
And revived MTV in the process at that time.
He made MTV billions of dollars,
Hmm.
without question. I mean, his concerts were his concerts. We know the Beatles before him and Elvis before him. They were big events. But Michael Jackson concert was not only the event, but you had presidents and kings and dictators and princesses, um, royalty fighting to get invited. Um, it was something about this guy. Like I said, you go into a room with him, and all of a sudden, everything changes. You
Wow.
almost freezes. You almost freeze because it's like, oh my gosh. And he doesn't have to say anything. He doesn't have to speak. And yet you're mesmerized simply by his presence. And every time I go up to when I went to Neverland, even when he wasn't there, I would be smitten with this feeling like, wow. Because when you visited Neverland, there was a book that he always wanted his guests to sign. Um, and it was held by a wax figure. This butler, but this butler was a wax figure. So before you enter the dining room, and I remember talking to Daryl Strawberry. Me and Daryl Strawberry was there together once, and
Wow. Look at that.
and Daryl and I would laugh about it. But Daryl, of course, he would make sense out of it. He says, "Listen, He says, "You think about it. We're in this man's home. This is where he lays his head. Certainly, he not only wants to know who was here, but he wants to know that you appreciate the hospitality." So I would sign his book all the time. I was writing his book. He wants you to leave a message. And I mean, I'm telling you, you would go through that book. At least I did. I don't know. I'm nosy. I'm a journalist. I go through that book, and see what Marlon Brando wrote, what Liz Taylor wrote, what Diana Ross wrote. This is me. I'm like, and I'd make sure that whatever I wrote was next to what Liz wrote or Marlon wrote or Diana Ross wrote or Barry Gordy wrote. I had to make sure. So I know he would see it. And and I would write about how amazing it takes an amazing mind to put together a place like this. Now some people say it's a sinister mind too because of what allegedly happened, but it's still, when you think about the good, when you think about it from a good standpoint, I mean, this place was like no other. In fact, Jay-Z and Beyonce once considered buying it after he died. Um, but the thing about Michael and you just, and Daryl talked about this too. He's like, man, he says, I've been around the greatest athletes in the world. I've been around some of the best entertainers. He says, but something about this guy. There's something about him, and you could never really, um, vocalize it or verbalize it. But it was always something about him that you just felt he had this idea. You had this idea that, okay, we're gonna protect him. We're gonna protect him. And I think that is the thing with most people who knew him, who was around him, his family. He could do no wrong. We got to protect him. And I think that's another reason why he got in so much trouble, because
Mm.
folks were, without knowing anything, were quick to protect him. And let's not, as Greer reminds me, let's not forget how gangster he could be too. We saw him with Al Sharpton in New York at Nan one year, talking about the music industry and Tommy Mottola in particular. Um, but I also know that, and I know this is a story that the family would not want me to tell, but heck, I'm gonna tell it. So Michael had, after he was acquitted, he had left the country immediately. He went to Bahrain and then several other places, and spent a couple of years incognito from his family, pretty much. Well, before he left, Randy Jackson, his youngest brother, had taken over. Um, in fact, Randy Jackson really saved Michael Jackson's life at the time, and I say that because Michael, when he went up with was on trial, he had a guy named Brian Oxman as his attorney, and I believe Brian had even got to the point where he was the lead attorney, which would have been disaster. He would have went to prison. He would have went to prison. Um, but um, Randy reached out to a guy named Johnny Cochran, and Johnny Cochran, of course, was ill at the time. No, most people didn't know it. I don't know that Randy knew he was ill, but Johnny Cochran said, "Listen, I can't take the case, but here's a guy that you should call." And he pointed him to a man named Tom Mesereau. And Tom Mesereau was a master in the courtroom. I mean, he was Johnny Cochran, and he was Perry Mason,
Mm.
and all those attorneys in one. This guy shredded um, the prosecution, particularly a guy. The weakest link in the prosecution was a guy named Gordon Auchincloss, and Tom Mesereau, I believe, sniffed that out immediately and exploited him. It was like Chris Darden. He made him Chris Darden point two, and that's Michael won that case. He was acquitted because of Tom Mesereau, for no other reason but Tom Mesereau. And Randy Jackson did that. Randy had gotten some friends to put up money. Michael was really in a cash problem. Got money to put up money to pay Tom and to pay for his defense and other things that they needed. Um, some of them mortgaged their homes, I was told. And Randy was like, "Don't worry, as soon as this is over, we will make sure you get your money back." And Michael was assured Randy that his friends would not be left holding the bag. And soon as the trial was over, Michael absconded to Bahrain and parts unknown, and Randy was furious. Michael returns to the United States finally in Las Vegas. Randy finds out, and he goes
Wow.
to the gates of the house. And then, um, Michael six his security on Randy, and they were going to jack Randy up big time. Randy had to leave, but they surrounded Randy's car, snatched him up like he was not a family member. And look, Michael's all the time. He's just like the Godfather in the window, like you can't touch me. So look, that was the gangster side of Michael Jackson. I had a conversation with Lisa Marie Presley, who, of course, we know married Michael. And this was, I went to a Divas show in Las Vegas. Remember VH1 Divas?
Mhm.
And after the show, Whitney Houston, Bobby Brown, Missy Elliott, Queen Latifah, everyone was there. Queen Latifah performed, Bobby and Whitney performed, Lisa performed, and so the after party, everyone had their tents. And it was outdoor. They had these tents that we could sit with them, and whatever. So I sat with Lisa, and Lisa, we were just talking, and she says, Stacy, a lot of people think they know that guy. This was long after they were divorced. A lot of people think they know that guy. It says they don't know the real Michael. They don't know the Michael that drinks, the Michael that cusses, the Michael that is a gangster. This is her words. And I said,
Straight
Lisa,
from
when you say
straight from Gary,
gangster,
Indiana.
Lisa, what exactly are you referring to? I mean, you're saying he's in the mob. She said, no, you know what I'm talking about. This is what Lisa said to me. She said, you black, you know what I'm talking about. She said, he's a black man who can be a black man in the streets at times. And I was like, really, really. And so what we're seeing there, so all these memories, I know we gotta wrap it up, but what we were seeing there is when the Jacksons were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Jackson Five, that was not the Jacksons, the Jackson Five. And I distinguished that to tell you this brief story. Randy Jackson, speaking of Randy and Michael, I mean, Randy and Jermaine, I should say, did not get along, and for obvious reasons. And most fans and people who know the Jacksons know why. Um, Jermaine and Randy share kids with the same woman, um, and they did not get along. And one of the complaints that at that particular time Jermaine had was that Randy was like going off the rails, and they shouldn't be together. And on an occasion like that, and it was Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, and myself. We're in the kitchen at their home, and they're contemplating, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We can't make a spectacle. We can't get security to separate us because we're going to be separate. We're going to be getting an award, and Randy's going to want to speak, and they're going on. And Takuma, this conversation went on for at least 10 to 15 minutes, and I'm listening. And one of the things I would never do without being invited to do is that butt in.
Mhm.
And I'll never forget Joseph told me one time, they was having these meetings or discussions, not meetings, but discussions. And I was like, okay, let me excuse myself because it was getting kind of deep and personal. And he's like, no, you need to hear this too. And
Wow.
so we're in the kitchen, and they're going on about Randy. And this is when they were getting inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That was in 1997. And I said, guys, can I say something? And Jackie was the first one. Sure, sure, sure. You guys are worried about Randy. Jermaine, you're worried about Randy, right? Why are you worried about Randy? Randy's not getting inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. What are you talking about? I said, Randy was not a Jackson 5 member. Oh, that's right. That's right. So we went on to do other things that night. I
Okay.
mean, this is the Jacksons, though. When folks say dysfunctional, they own it. They own dysfunctional. And And there's nothing wrong per se about being dysfunctional. Heck, my family's dysfunctional.
Hey, everybody's family's got some
Right.
dysfunction, right?
Exactly. Exactly. My family, my brothers and sisters, we are totally dysfunctional. But but the problem with the Jacksons is that they couldn't see beyond their family. They couldn't see beyond anything else. They were raised that way, and stardom hit them quick. Certainly, Michael hit real quick. So they couldn't see beyond uh, the next second on things, except when they were creating, of course. I mean, these guys were very innovative. But there's so many things. Such a you hope if you knew anything about them, and certainly if you knew them. One of the hopes, and I said this to Jermaine before we had the big falling out. I said my hope for you guys is that you can put all this celebrity aside and be a family, a real family. You guys are from the ghetto, Gary, Indiana. It doesn't get any more ghetto than Gary, Indiana. You got all this fame and notoriety. You blew millions of dollars. The brothers blew millions of dollars. You know what it's like to have millions of dollars um, in this world in your bank account. But be family and watch how everything changes. And I said, while you guys waiting, because one of the things the brothers would kill me with is waiting. They didn't perform, and you see the Temptations, who are not the Temptations except for
Yeah.
Otis, and the Four Tops, who are not the Four Tops, the Supremes, who are not. They're out there constantly performing, making money. Right?
Mhm.
You guys are alive. You are the Jacksons. You're the Jackson Five or the Jacksons, however you want to go out, and you can make money doing this. You don't need Michael. In fact, fans will come out because they will always hope that this is the day that Michael joins you on stage. And they would never do it. They would tell me how right I was, but they would never do it. Michael dies, and a year or so later, the brothers announced that they're going on tour. I sent Jermaine a message telling him how proud I was of that moment and how happy I was for him and his brothers. Wish it would have happened before Michael died, but glad it's happening. Of course, that blew up too because now when you see the Jacksons performing, it's Tito, it's Marlon, Jackie, and then it's their kids. And the other brothers, Jermaine doesn't participate anymore. Randy never participated. So it's heartbreaking that this is a family that most of us in the Black community we looked up to. Some idolized them.
Mhm.
You couldn't go to any Black house without a poster of Michael and daughter Jackson's on somebody's wall,
Yeah.
and that's
Facts.
the lasting impact. We don't do posters anymore. We do social media and phones, and I guarantee you got a lot of young ones with Michael Jackson on their phone somehow.
Wallpapers.
Wallpaper. You said wallpapers?
Mhm.
But yes, 15 years ago today, that man, the consummate, the ultimate entertainer, the greatest pop music entertainer ever, died so young at the age of 50. He had just gotten his AARP card.
Wow.
We will remember Michael. Uh, and I mean, I have so many memories, but I certainly didn't want to make it about me. That's for sure. But one of the last quick things I'll share is this: like when he died, I, I felt like wow, I was bombarded from media all over the world. My managing editor, a great managing editor, guy named Larry Beaupre. I'll never forget. I was working for the Times in Scranton, and we had media outlets from Germany, from France, from Japan, from London, from all over the United States. Call the Scranton Times, and Larry Beaupre, the managing editor, the no nonsense managing editor. He would take calls for me. and we had news stations come. We'd use our conference room for me to do interviews about Michael's passing. And I was working during Michael's trial for MSNBC News, and Phil Griffin was the president of NBC News or MSNBC. And Phil would send me all over the place. And I do all the shows, Morning Joe and Abrams Report and Scarborough, everything. Chris Matthews, Lester Holt, NBC Nightly News, and Phil. Also, when I left MSNBC to go work for the Times, Phil, I would call Phil up if I needed a personality to interview, and he would, oh, sure, sure. He'd make the contact to make the contact. The Office, which was set in Scranton, Pennsylvania, about Scranton, Pennsylvania, the TV show, the popular TV show, they had a office convention, and Al Roker was coming, and I called Phil up. I need time with Al Roker, some one-on-one time, some exclusive time. He set that up. When Michael died, Phil called me. Now, at this point, when Michael died, me and the family were not on good terms at all, speaking terms at all. And Phil calls me up. My wife and I were at a park, and we were watching a concert in the park. And he goes, "I need you to go to California." Now, I had not worked for MSNBC at that time for a couple of years now. And I said, "Phil, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it." And he says, "Why? Why?" I says, "Because I think it would be disrespectful of me to show up there at this point. The family don't, the last person they want to see at this point is me." And Phil says, "No, I need you to go." He says, "Look, I'm sending something in the mail right now." Phil says, I said, "What is it?" He says, "It's a blank check. Fill it in and go." I said, I still refuse to do it. And you refuse Phil Griffin, I learned he will never forgive you. And I was never able to reach him again when I turned his blank check down. But I had to be respectful to the Jacksons at that point. I could not show up at that funeral because it is them grieving the loss of the most prolific member of a very prolific family. And so, but anyway, this went on for months that the media would descend upon the Scranton Times. They came to my home. I did interviews in my backyard. It was just a lot. And finally, the Times said, "Take a vacation. You deserve it." And they sent me to the Virgin Islands. My wife and I, our little daughter Paris was a baby. They had people pick us up at the airport, gave us massages, and everything. This really treated us so greatly. But the point that I was getting to is this: that I never forget. My wife turned to me, and this was sometime in August, and Michael had died June 25th. She said, with all this going on, I've not heard one person ask you, how do you feel? How are you doing? And she said, you never got a chance to really even tell me how you feel. And I think how I felt was captured by a conversation I had with Michael's brother in law. Um, it was probably a month after Michael died. We were on the phone together. We were talking about Michael, and this guy was lighting Michael up. I mean, he called him a pedophile. He called him all types of names. And then he broke down. Why did he do this? Why? Um, I could have helped him. We used to be so close. And he broke down on the phone. And is how that encapsulated my feelings right there. Just be angry, angry, bombarded, as if I was a family member. And then the inner tears. I think I shed only inward. My kids always say, "Dad, we've never seen you cry," Uh, but the inner tears that I shed for that man, who, I mean, I knew his family a whole lot better than I knew him, and I just thought, "Wow, this is not right. This is not right." And despite what I believed he did, and I have no love for anybody who abuses a child, but despite what I believed he did, remember, he was exonerated, right? It just hurt to the core that we lost him. And that is to sum up what I have to say about Michael Joseph Jackson. Died, as his song says, gone too soon. Takuma, thanks for indulging us. Any last thoughts from you?
I got to get the book. I need the book about this particular chapter for sure from you. You went to Neverland Ranch. That's wow.
Well,
But
the beautiful thing is I'll get to go to Paisley Park in August for the
there you
first
go.
time. I've gone to Graceland, been to Neverland 100 times. Well, for the first time, I'll get to go to Paisley Park. So, but yes, lots of memories about Michael Jackson. 15. I cannot believe it's been 15 years. 15. What have you been doing for 15 years, Takuma?
Working, working hard.
Well, much love,
Man,
much respect to Katherine Jackson, who is still with us. Joseph was, died a few years ago. Uh, this was a gut punch on steroids to Catherine when she lost Michael, and all the best to her, and all the best to the Jacksons, regardless of lingering uh, bad feelings. I got tweeted at by Taj and Tito's son recently, but hey, much love to them, and hope they will find and hope they have found a measure of peace, and hope that they will spend this day not mourning but reflecting and embracing what that man did for the world. Thank you all for watching. Let it be known. We'll see you tomorrow.